Hello Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video, and welcome to episode 180 of Ask Bossk Bounty. This is the weekly Q&A series that drops every Sunday, where I answer your questions. So if you do have a question for next week's episode and you want to be featured in the video, please leave that question in the comment section below. I do apologise that I didn't get round to everybody's questions in this video. There was a ton of great questions to choose from, but unfortunately I can't fit all of them in. However, please don't let that deter you, and please leave that same question in the comment section below, and hopefully I will answer it next week. With all that being said, if you happen to enjoy the video, don't forget to drop a like down below, because that helps the video and the channel. And let's get on to the first question. Actually, sorry, before we do get on to the first question, I just quickly wanted to talk about these four figures here. This is the 212th Phase 2 Clone Trooper Battle Pack, or Army Builder Pack, and I managed to get these yesterday from Hasbro Pulse, and I've done the review. It's on the channel, but apparently there is a running change. So my good buddies over at the TVC Instagram group have posted a picture, and apparently in the US some people are getting these with the black band on the helmet, the brow. As you can see here, this helmet here on the Phase 2 clone from Andor has that black line around there. Apparently there is a running change that these ones include it. And I think basically when these were first revealed, you know, a lot of people in the community, including myself, SWTVC, the Vintage Collection Facebook group run by John Miko, I think we all put out some polls basically saying, you know, would you prefer them to be animated style or based on realistic interpretations? And it was a resounding answer basically. I think 85% of the people that voted on my poll wanted them to be more realistic. So Hasbro have listened. They have actually listened, and there's been a running change. And you can check that out on the SWTVC Instagram page, the sort of comparison between the two. But that is good news. Of course, it doesn't sort out the actual helmet problem that we have at the moment, but at least it's something. Braddock843 says, "Hi Bossk, awesome content as always. Hammerhead was rumoured a while back, I think even pipelined. Do you know if this figure is still in the pipeline? Thanks for all you do for the hobby." I'm not too sure if it has ever pipelined, my friend. Maybe it is a rumour. I think the rumour may have come from the Black Series, because I think they're getting that, what's his name, Doc Ondar from sort of Galaxy's Edge. And of course, if they're doing that figure, then obviously you would immediately think that they would then do a Hammerhead basically from that figure, because they're not just going to sort of do a brand new sculpt for one figure. They're going to obviously want to repaint it and reuse it in other ways. In terms of the Vintage Collection, I've never actually heard that rumour for Hammerhead. I wish it was true though, because I would love that on a vintage card. It would be pretty awesome. Netta's Network says, "Hi sweetie, Netta's Network here. Troy Pacelli and I love your content." Ah, Troy Pacelli, I know him. Good man, good man. Question for next week. You may have answered this in the past, but what is your Holy Grail item? Have you gotten it, or are you still searching? Well, it's difficult really, because there's always something that I want. But I think if you're talking about true Holy Grails, I always have to go back to this. This is the Spanish POC Bossk. There isn't really many of these around, maybe 20, 25 of them, I would suggest. Pretty expensive figure. So I would say, because I'm a Bossk focus collector, to have this in my collection, I think, you know, that's my Holy Grail completed basically. I'm not really too sure if there's anything else, especially in that price range, that one I can afford, or two that I'd really want. But yeah, great question. Patreon supporter Aquarish Doug says, "Hey BB, my question for next week are about exclusive TVC figures. Firstly, does it concern you that Walmart has only supported 3 ARC Troopers and there is no sign of an Amazon multi-pack this year, especially as there were 2 big anniversaries and tons of new media content? Previous years we seem to get a lot more exclusive figures, even if they are just minor retools or repaints. Secondly, what are your hopes for a convention exclusive this year after getting the Rescue set last year and the Emperor's Throne Room the year before? Cheers, love the content, Aquarish Doug." So I'm going to concentrate on the second part of your question first of all, which is what I would like from a convention exclusive this year. And it's probably something that will never be made, but it doesn't stop me wanting it. And I would like them to do like a scene from The Mandalorian with Pelimotto, a couple of pit droids, maybe a BD droid, some barrels and things like that, maybe some electrical equipment, things that we can put around the N1 Starfighter when we get that. I'm not too sure how they would do Pelimotto, which is probably the reason why I don't think they would do that idea, but I still think it's a pretty good idea nonetheless. In terms of, am I worried about exclusives? It's a funny one, isn't it? Because usually people are like complaining about exclusives, but no, I don't think it really worries me. I think the big retailers are still interested in the Vintage Collection. We'll probably see some more next year, so Yeah, it doesn't really worry me, my friend. Slaphead1967 says, hi Tim, question for next week. Do you catalogue your collection, carded and loose? And if so, how please? And do you use an app or spreadsheet or do something else? Keep up the great content. To be honest, buddy, I am probably the worst person to ask about this. I've said this before. I'm really unorganised. I really wish I'd kept a spreadsheet, especially over the last 5 years, of the things that I've bought and how much I've paid for them. Unfortunately, I never did that, and I don't think it's really worth starting it now. However, there is an app called My Toy Box. I think it's still called that, or it might just be called Toy Box now. And basically that has all the different lines, and you can basically select whether you've got it carded or loose. I always find that app was pretty good, and it's a way of at least sort of, you know, keeping an eye on what you need or what you want, because there's a little wanted tick box and you can go straight to that to see what you want or need. So that's quite handy. I don't use it as much as I used to, but certainly a couple of years ago I was using that. Garen Anderson says, hi boss, love the content as always. Question for next week: if Hasbro ever finishes the retro collection line for the original 96, do you think they will also remake the Droid series and Ewok cartoon figures? Thanks. I've got to say I don't think they'll do that, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, I think some of the figures that were in the Droids cartoon are pretty sort of unknown characters. I mean, I wouldn't be able to name them all offhand, so I think bringing those out would only hit sort of like, you know, real hardcore collectors. And I think the whole point of the retro collection is to sort of bring in those people that haven't really, you know, collected Star Wars for a long time. It's like, oh look, there's Han Solo, I used to have him when I was a kid. That kind of thing. So I don't think they'll probably do that. I'm not even sure if they will end up finishing the 96 either. I mean, can you imagine them trying to sell like General Medine, for example? I'm not too sure if they'd ever do that, but who knows, man. Maybe they will do the 96. It'll probably take them a long time to do it. But yeah, the Droids and Ewoks, probably pushing it a bit too far. Maybe they'll do like Wicket or something, the main characters, but all of them, definitely not. Anders Vanberg 3349 says, hi boss, great video as always. Question for next week: do you know if the upcoming HasLab will be available to collectors in countries that don't have Hasbro Pulse? I really do hope so, and that was the case with the Razor Crest, because at the time the Razor Crest came out, the UK did not have Hasbro Pulse, so we had to order it through Zavvi, I think it was. And I think places like Australia had Zing Pop Culture selling it, and you know, they accumulated all the backers that way. And you know, because I think if they really want it to hit the goals, then really they need to be selling it worldwide. So I really do hope so, and obviously because we want all the collectors that actually want it around the world to be able to get it. I'll never really forgive them for the barge, because obviously the hoops that I had to jump through to get myself a barge were incredibly difficult, and you know, I'm just glad that when they eventually did the Razor Crest, it was at least available somehow to the UK and other countries. This is an interesting one from Lee Keyburn, and he says, hey BB, question for next week: if and when Hasbro provides the complete original 96 Kenner figures in the Vintage Collection, are you content with the line ending and Hasbro starting a new hyper-articulated 3.75 inch line? Me personally, I love the card backs of the Vintage Collection. However, I think the release of all the 96 is a perfect place to end the line and start something new. I think that probably is fair to say. If they did finish the 96, then it's a good place to end it. I don't think they will be able to finish the 96, certainly in the next 5 years. So in that case, you know, how long will TVC go on for? I think the issue around like starting a new 3.75 inch line, I would worry for the actual health of that line, because I think 50% of the sales or more come from carded collectors, and the carded collectors want this original sort of Kenner style card back, even if it's figures from new media and not from the 96. There's a number of people out there that just want that card, you know, this racetrack design with new characters from new media or whatever, or figures that weren't released in the Kenner line. So I think I would be a little bit concerned about the sort of, you know, the survival of 3.75 in general if the TVC wasn't the sort of main line. That's just my opinion on it. Obviously it was different 15 years ago with the Legacy collection and what have you. I think kids were buying them more. Parents could afford to buy them for their children, and also, you know, smartphones weren't such a huge thing back then, and I think the smartphone, you know, has grabbed kids' attention, and the market for Star Wars action figures has shrunk. And let's face it, the Vintage Collection and the Black Series are aimed at adults. TVC Dadalorian says, great update, just a thought, as Hasbro likes to repaint, will they re-release the Book of Boba Fett throne room as a Jabba's version? That way they get value for money. I'm not too sure about re-releasing it, you know, like rebranded as the Return of the Jedi with Jabba and what have you. I think what's more likely is that they'll just release a Jabba. I think if you look at what the Black Series have done with Jabba the Hutt in that vintage style box, I really do hope that we could expect something similar for the Vintage Collection, and then obviously you could just put him into that set, you know? Job done. The Darth Eddie says, great show today. Question for next time. Would you still like to see Dengar, Bespin Leia and Logray repacked with real photo repaints and as part of another wave? They were originally talked about being in the works and coming up in 2023 at some point, but then the plastic-free packaging mess hit and all the news about the proposed Dengar repack wave went away with not a peep since. All three are original trilogy characters, so there'd be a baked-in market for repack Dengar, even if he ended up being a bad peg warmer in 2011 and 2012. So I'm not against it at all. I would, you know, especially the Leia here that I've got here, I do not have that figure loose. Rather than just giving that one a repaint though, if they could actually give it a new head like they did with Shae Vizsla, that would be absolutely awesome. Because then I think the people that have already got this figure, like carded collectors, might want that one as well. I think it'd sell better if they did that, if they actually bothered to give it a new head rather than just some photo real on that head. I think we've already seen that photo real on older figures doesn't really work as well as it does on the new figures. Logray I'm not really too bothered about. Of course it'd be great for people that don't have him, especially in the year of the Return of the Jedi 40th anniversary. So yeah, it is a bit strange with that wave. I think the other character that was in that wave, was it Weequay I think, and he did get released but within another wave if you like. So maybe Hasbro haven't actually forgotten about them and we will be getting them, who knows. But yeah, it was a bit strange that one, wasn't it? Because it was leaked and then it all went quiet. Channel member TVC Macken, it was great to meet you by the way at ICCC, buddy. He says, hi Tim, question for next week. Is there any particular scene you would like to see Hasbro expand around after getting much Jabba's Palace and Endor stuff this year? Keep up the great content. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could sort of talk about the obvious ones like the cantina or maybe the officer briefing room or things like that, but I think I'm going to go new media and I'm going to go Mandalorian Season 3. I think, you know, they need to expand upon and in fact just start the end scene of Mando Season 3. So we want those Praetorian Guards, we want the Imperial Commandos or whatever they were, those white dudes, the new Moff Gideon. There's plenty that they need to do for that end scene. Some of the other Mandos that were involved in the last battle. So there's plenty that they can do for that scene. So yeah, I'm going to choose that. Channel member Russell Banks says, hi Tim. As a long-time viewer, I thought it was about time I submitted a question for next week. When I was a kid, I avidly collected the original Kenner figures and vehicles, but my dream item was a full-scale lightsaber, specifically Luke's from Return of the Jedi. Around 40 years later, I finally had my wish granted with the Force Effects Elite release. Not cheap, but an amazing item. Did you have anything similar that you wished was available when you were younger, but have managed to add to your collection as an adult? Keep up the great content. I only discovered TVC during lockdown and your videos have massively helped me build my collection, so a huge thanks for that. No problem, buddy. I am here to spend your money, okay? No, it's great that you found TVC and that you're collecting it. That is awesome, man. So I think for me, rather than it being an item, it was more of like a technology. So it really used to frustrate me when I was playing with my Star Wars figures when I was a kid that you couldn't like put the biker scout onto the speeder bike properly. You know, you couldn't bend his knees or his elbows. So I think, you know, the fact that we've got super articulated figures as good as these days, that's kind of what I wanted. I used to play with Action Force, G.I. Joe. The A-Team figures even had sort of bendy arms and knees. And it just frustrated me that the Star Wars figures sort of couldn't do that. However, I think there has been a period in between then and now that, you know, sometimes they looked a bit dodgy. I never liked it when you could see the joint on the arms and things like that, but I think they've got a lot better at, you know, sort of hiding that and covering it up and just making them look awesome. So I think that's probably it. The frustration of not being able to sort of play with my Star Wars figures like I did with like the A-Team and G.I. Joe. B-Wing says, hey BB, thanks for all your content. Question for next week. How do you store your loose figures? The ones that are not on display? Do you put each figure in a little baggie with their accessories or something? Maybe store all the figures in one box and the accessories in another? As someone relatively new to collecting TVC, it's getting difficult to keep track of all these extra guns, hands, heads, accessories, etc. as my collection grows. Thanks. So yeah, once again, I'm not the best person to ask this to because I'm really unorganized. However, I have recently sorted all of that out because I am moving collection rooms very, very soon, maybe in the next 12 weeks or so. And so I've bagged all of my figures up that aren't on display and I put them in bags like this. I make sure they're acid-free bags as well, because you don't want them sort of damaging the figures or anything. And I tend to put like a loose figure with his blaster or accessories, you know, like that. What I do struggle with is when a figure comes with extra accessories that I'm not going to display. So for example, these guys come with multiple weapons. So this guy here is holding both, but this guy is only holding the long rifle. So what am I going to do with this? And what I do is I tend to put them all in one baggie. So I've got lightsaber hilts, lightsabers, you know, blasters, blast effects, helmets, all sorts of stuff in one bag. And it's going to be a bit of a task to sort all that out, but you know, that's the mess I've sort of put myself in. Futurama Yeah says, we saw live action Zeb from Rebels. Do you think we'll get figures based on their live action appearances? So when we're talking about the Rebels crew specifically, I think it's all going to come down to the HasLab and what's included in the HasLab, because I think we've all kind of accepted it's the Ghost. Even Hasbro put out a tease the other day, something written in Aurebesh, which basically talked about, you know, front cannons and top cannon and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it could be from another ship, but with all the rumours around and everything, I'm pretty sure it's going to be the Ghost. So it depends what comes with that. Now, if they do tiers or unlocks, or, you know, the base offering have some or all of the Rebels crew, Zeb, for example, there is absolutely no way that you won't get Zeb in another format, you know? So no doubt if you get Zeb from the Rebels crew in his Rebels attire, then no doubt eventually you will get Zeb from the live action Mandalorian show. Absolutely 100%, because they're not going to waste that sculpt. They'll reissue it, repaint it, stick him in a pilot's uniform, all that kind of stuff. I'm quite even surprised that they haven't seen that in the Black Series yet, to be honest, because, you know, they've already got the Zeb figure over there. Maybe that'll get pipelined at SDCC or something, but yeah, so basically that's what I think. I think, you know, if you get all of the Rebels crew in the HasLab in some shape or form, then you'll get their live action versions later on down the line, whether they're from Ahsoka or whatever, I don't know, but that's what I think will happen. Cheesehead1204 says, hey boss, question for next week. Do you think there's a possibility of more TVC figures from the Andor series? The selection thus far has been disappointing, especially given how they handled the Clone Trooper's helmet and the Aldani mission Cassian's legs. I would love something like the Narkina 5 Cassian and Kino Loy figures, or maybe even a Narkina 5 playset. That feels like optimistic thinking though, especially as Hasbro seems ready to move on to Ahsoka. Thanks for the great content as always. And I think the last bit of your question there is spot on, basically. If you think about it, they're moving on to Ahsoka, then they'll move on to the Skeleton Crew. They've got Mando Season 3 to make, and I think Andor, like Obi-Wan, like Book of Boba Fett eventually, you know, they are going to be in the rearview mirror as we go forward. It's just because they've got too much to make in terms of new figures, and it's just impossible for them to keep up with the amount of media that's coming. And it's unfortunate, because I, like you, would like to see more stuff from Andor. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but me personally, I would like to see more. And there's a couple of similar questions here, one from Darth Hideous 9084 and one from Danny Van Heck 1682. Danny Van Heck is saying, you know, why aren't they making an 8D8 or an EV-9D9? And Darth Hideous is saying, you know, why haven't we got an IG-88 using the IG-11 mould, and also Jango Fett using the Mando molds, basically. I don't think you need to worry about Jango Fett. I'm pretty sure, you know, it's a big enough character, and as you say, you know, with all these new Mandos and everything, I think they'd be silly not to do Jango. I think we can expect a Jango at some point. He's always done well in brackets and polls and things like that. It's about time he was updated, and you know, they've done Boba Fett now. I can see them doing that. IG-88 is a little bit different because, you know, is he exactly the same as IG-11? Would you be okay if they just repainted IG-11 into IG-88? I think he's a little bit different, personally. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think he is. And then the other two, 8D8 and EV-9D9, why haven't they done them? And I think it's going back to that previous question about, you know, why aren't we getting more figures from Andor and things like that? It's because if they were to do an EV-9D9 or an 8D8, they can't just use this one from the Power of the Force. They've got to do a new sculpt. And, you know, new tooling dollars tend to go on new media figures, unfortunately. It's very rare that we get all new figures from previous media. I mean, you only have to look at the Han Solo from Endor. It was a kit bash figure when really that one should have been all new. So that's the problem that they've got. Too many figures to make, not enough budget. and you know, too much new media. Alright then guys, that's it for this week's episode 180. I want to thank you all for watching, and remember, if you want your question answered next week, which will be episode 181, please leave your questions in the comment section below. I absolutely love doing this series and interacting with you guys and answering your questions. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members for the extra support you give my channel. If you are interested in becoming a channel member or a Patreon supporter, those links are in the description below. Thanks for watching everybody, and we shall see you on the next one.